problems that a society might face economically or in terms of jobs or in terms of, hunger and poverty and all of these things might eventually lead to a change in the value set. When we think about the disruption that has been caused by the recent AI boom, is that reflecting in terms of values, and what's the impact of that on change management?
So I think people are having to look at their values when they talk about AI. I mean, the example I can give you from the BBC was that we actually hung all of our policies and thoughts and culture about the way we wanted to embrace AI at the BBC around our values. So can we be trusted? Will we give out the news and all of our trusted sources with integrity? Will we be creative in the way that we do our program making? So I think that it's really important that people think about the values, and that does play into AI and everything else that we do as a society. I'm not sure if I'm looking at your face. I'm not sure if I'm answering this correctly for you, but
Oh,
I
I'm
think
listening.
that sorry, okay. I just want to be sure I'm answering it correctly. But I think for me, when we set about Petra Aben, who's going to be with me shortly as well, when we sat down and said, what is it we want, when we realized that actually what we had to do to meet the values and to make sure everybody understood the culture of the AI that we wanted to roll out, particularly in the BBC, was that we had to build an education program. You couldn't just suddenly say you can use Midjourney tomorrow, or you can use ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever it might be, right? We had to work out who could use what they could use it for, when they could use it, whether they could even use it. Because,
Mm.
and we'll probably get into this in the podcast, would it create a bias? Would it unsupport what it was we were trying to say? What is it we needed it for? And at what point did we really need to
Yeah.
do the AI? Things like surveys, employee engagement surveys, right? AI is brilliant. You know why? When we did ours, we used AI to go through all the data, and we worked out for 6 years we hadn't changed one thing at all on the survey, because every survey told us the same thing. And in fact, the results got worse. So because they got worse, we recognized that that was the one thing we had to improve on. So I'm not saying don't use it. I'm just saying work out what you were saying. How do I use it? Where do I use it? And where do I use it to the best of the ability? And will it speed up something I could do? Yeah.
So with that, so the reason I was listening intently and very, very hard to that was just to make the distinction between what is a corporate value set and what is an individual value set, because those things are different. And I think we're talking more about corporate values and aligning the sanctioned use of AI with the corporate values in a way that's effectively risk control. Is
Totally
that fair?
risk control. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right.
Okay.
And that people understand the code of conduct, what they're signing up to. They take responsibility for the way that they will use it, that they won't abuse it, because again, it can be used in different ways, right?
Yeah. So if we think about that just for a second, so I understand corporations have to mitigate risk, they have to control the risk from something that is potentially a disruptive force in technology. There's always a balance between education developing skills, allowing the freedom to innovate and the freedom to play, and the risk control of the business. And separate to that balance between those two things, there's also a societal kind of imperative that people should have the skills to move the economy forward. And
Mhm.
all of these things, to some degree, will hinge on values and economics and jobs and all of the things that we've discussed. But when a corporation is being restrictive around the things that it is applying, is
Yeah,
that, if we take a change management lens, for example, if a
sure.
company wants to transform and they want to be the best in their market, they want to have a competitive advantage, they want to have the skills for the future, is there some kind of hindrance if you lock everything down and you say, only sanctioned use and only the way that we use it? I understand the values point and the risk
Yeah, I mean,
control,
I think,
but
yeah,
is it short
yeah, I
sighted?
mean, yeah. I think it depends on what it's about. So one might argue it is short-sighted generally. I mean, generally it's like all these things, right? You tell a child not to put their finger on the stove because they might get burnt, so they put their finger on the stove. So if you tell somebody that they can't use something, they immediately want to use it. If you then go out as a change manager and say, on Wednesday, you now need to use this as part of your role, most people will resist you because that's change management. That's the reality, right? If I said don't put anything at all on the internal intranet ever, you could be sure that everything would be put on the internal intranet always. So this is just life. This is just change. So you have to look to explain it. So to your point, if you're not going to allow somebody to do something for whatever reason it is, you must explain why. So a really good example was that we said to everybody when I was in my role at the BBC was that they didn't want us to use TikTok. We didn't actually explain to people why they shouldn't use TikTok. We never gave them the reasons as to why they couldn't use TikTok. So people buck against the change, people do things that they shouldn't do. The main reason we didn't want people to do TikTok is because it would reveal sources for programs, and it would reveal, particularly investigative journalism. You would be able to be co-located, outed, and before you know it, on some dark web before the program was even aired. But we don't tell people that, right? If you tell people that and treat them like adults, really intelligent people, they wouldn't do it. So I think my view on any change management is about the communication, Ash. You have to make sure that you tell people why. It's all about the why we need to do it, why we need to get there, why you need to embrace it, and what you can and what you can't do, and why you can and why you can't do that. Those are the big things.
Then you trust the people to exercise their judgment based on their education and skills, right? Or is it more restrictive than that?
Again, I think it's horses for courses, and I'm not being difficult with my answer. I genuinely, it depends on what it is. I think, there are some things that everybody just needs to be able to do, like the finance system at work. Everybody needs to be able to claim their expenses, book their holiday, call in sick. Of course, that's open to all, that's everything. Some people might be able to use Gamma, some people might not be able to use Gamma. We might allow people to use Midjourney, some areas of the business might not be allowed to. Again, I think it's about understanding what is the technology that you're rolling out, who are you rolling it out to. Some people might not even need to use it. There is the other side of it. Actually, you don't need it because you just don't need it. So we're not going to waste your time. So for me, when I go about any new program, any new technology, anything that it is, you have to do an impact analysis, and you have to work out who is it for, what is it for, what will it enhance, what might be, you might even have some sort of interim plan, because it may not be for all at the same time, or some people may have to come to it sooner rather than later. Some people might have to dual run. When we moved 7 buildings into one building, we had 2 6 o'clock news studios, we had 2 10 o'clock news studios, etc. Because if one went off air, we still had to be able to give you the 10 o'clock news, right? So you have to be very clear in your change management plan, your communications, and exactly who it's for, when it's for, and why and when. That to me is fundamental of any technology you roll out.